In 2011, I was apartment hunting and found this one place that seemed perfect. There is a main house. Behind it was a guest house that had been recently renovated into a duplex. The ground floor of the guest house had been converted into a large covered garage that could fit 3 cars plus a ton of storage items. It was really musty, had a terrifying spider population, and lacked working lights. A flight of wobbly wooden steps led up to the second floor deck, where 2 side-by-side entrance doors for the separate apartments were. When I first moved in, the guest house had just finished renovations, and the rental agency hadn't found anyone for the other apartments yet. I enjoyed the peace and quiet, which was perfect for studying. A few months after school started in the fall, a new girl moved in. She introduced herself as Angela, and said that she went to the same school as me. She was studying biology and was a freshman. She seemed pretty nice and was pretty quiet at first. However, of course, cue nightmare. After the first month, I started hearing an annoying clapping noise emanating from her apartment. It sounded like she had cloven hooves. She had wood floors and the sound echoed like crazy. It would suddenly start at 3 a.m., and it would wake my dogs and they would start howling. Soon, I started hearing the most comical sex noises ever. It sounded like the cheesiest ones you could expect. This went on every day, multiple times a day. At first I thought, good for her. After the 3rd day though, I was tired of it. Bye-bye perfect study environment. One day when I was getting ready to step outside to grab the mail, I heard voices out on the deck talking. One male, one Angela. I peeked out through my peephole and saw an older guy, maybe 60 to 65 years old, with a fat belly, white hair, and a sweat-stained undershirt. This was maybe 10 minutes following one of the comical sex routines. I assumed that she had a super old sugar daddy and waited until they left to grab my mail. A week later, I pulled into the back alley that led to the garage entrance and saw a car parked in front of the garage, blocking the entrance. I assumed Angela had a friend over who decided to park there. So, I knocked on her door and she answered in feathered lingerie and clear platform stripper shoes. A very sweaty and out-of-breath older guy said that he would move the car. By this point, I hadn't realized what Angela was really doing. I excitedly texted my friends the news and we laughed about it. The next night, it was really dark out. I had gone to the grocery store and pulled into the back alley. The floodlight was out and it was unnervingly dark. I always hated pulling into the garage because it's insanely creepy, especially when it's this dark out. However, I opened up the door, slid my car in, and then got out to unload. A dark shadow stood at the garage entrance next to my trunk. Hello. I almost peed my pants. Though I liked my guest house, it wasn't in the best neighborhood, and I was convinced that I was going to be mugged finally. Instead, the man made small talk, asking me if I lived next door to Angela, was I a student, how did I like the area, and did I have a boyfriend, and so on. He told me that I was very beautiful and that he had always wanted an Asian girlfriend. I walked closer to him and saw it was the man from the other week with the white hair and the sweat-stained shirt. I was really evasive and asked him if he needed any help. When he said that he just wanted to get to know me, I said no thanks. He told me that he would pay me. I realized he probably thought that I was the same as Angela, and I quickly told him to get out of here. I rushed past him and I went upstairs, leaving my groceries in the car and the garage door wide open. Shortly after, I started noticing that things were missing or moved in my apartment. Clothes would go missing. I would hunt desperately for a pair of leggings or a dress or a bra, and I would never be able to find them, even after searching the laundry hamper. Stuff like mail or books would be moved from one room to another. My dogs and cats also started acting really skittish. Sometimes I would catch them staring intently up at a corner. One night, I woke up at around 3 a.m. to hear really serious scratching noises coming from the living room. It sounded like a large animal with big claws was digging away at something. I mumbled, "Muffin, stop." I felt a paw on my arm and I slowly opened my eyes. Muffin was on my bed with me, looking at me nervously. Okay. I sat up and looked around. My other dog and my cat were both sleeping soundly at my bed too. So what was in the living room making these scratching noises? I also noticed that my bedroom door, which I had shut when I had gone to sleep, was now wide open. Nope. I've never been one to believe in the supernatural, but I was pretty convinced based on the signs that there was a ghost living in my apartment. I put in headphones to drown out the noise and stayed up all night doing paranormal research on my laptop. I never once got out of my bed to check the living room. I was way too terrified. The next day, I created my dogs and cats and I went to school. When I got home, I noticed the wall next to the front door had some really deep scratches in it. The drywall and paint were ruined. These hadn't been there the previous day and my pets were crated while I was gone. So I couldn't figure out where these had come from. Must be the ghost, I thought. The landlord had told me previously that there were paint cans in the garage, so I figured I would try to hide the ghost mess with some paint. I went down into the garage. Right in front of my parking spot inside the garage is this weird little workspace that someone had constructed before I moved in. I never looked inside, but it was maybe 6x4 and had walls made of particle board. I didn't see any cans of paint on the garage floor, so I figured this was a storage room for stuff like that. I opened the makeshift door to the workspace. First, I saw shelves with paint cans. Great. And then I looked down and saw a blanket, pillows, flashlight, giant plastic canister of cheese balls, a big screwdriver, and a Velcro wallet. There was also a weird set of pull-down stairs at the top of the workspace, attached to the garage ceiling, like the kind you would use with an attic. I picked up the wallet and looked inside. Bam, a photo ID of that creepy sweat-stained shirt guy. I immediately fled the garage and went into my apartment to call the cops and report that a homeless guy had apparently moved into my garage. The cops came to investigate. First, they found that the pull-down stairs led to a door in the ceiling that resembled a ceiling tile. When they lifted and moved the ceiling tile aside, you were in my unused utility closet in my apartment. The cops asked if I ever noticed anything strange in my apartment, and I told them about the missing and moved stuff. Apparently, the screwdriver found in the workspace had flecks of paint and drywall on it. I don't know why someone would just sit in my living room and scratch at the wall with a screwdriver in the middle of the night. But I am so glad that I never left my bedroom to look at the ghost now. The cops never found my missing clothing though. The cops also never found or caught the guy. I tried to confront Angela about the weirdos that she was bringing to our building, and how one had been living in the garage and breaking into my apartment, but she mysteriously disappeared. No more funny noises at 3 a.m. or clopping. Mail piled up in her box, and then randomly, a month later, a new guy was living there. Weirded out, I called the landlord, who said the new guy was a new tenant and wouldn't give me information on what had happened to Angela. Creepy. When I was a kid around 8 or 9 years old, my uncle would take me and my 2 younger cousins, all girls, to a park every Thursday evening. It was a small, run-down park but had bright lights and a few functional rides like spinning teacups, and a small train, so we enjoyed our weekly trips there. Being the oldest, I was kind of an old soul, overly cautious, reserved, and somewhat paranoid. I would tell my younger cousins to behave well in public, not to make too much noise or to be overly friendly with strangers. However, I was still a child and often went with the flow. During one of our weekly outings, we decided to visit the Haunted Shack on the park, which was another amusement presented by the low-budget park. As we were going in, a group of young men also slipped in. When the park attendant told them that they only allowed family members to accompany minors, they claimed that they came with us and they were our uncles. Numbly, and like the idiot that I was, I nodded when the attendant asked me. I was just relieved that I wouldn't have to be alone with my younger cousins in the haunted house. The house was more of a mud hut, with hay on the floor and a very strong smell of decay. There were strobing red string lights around and some random broken pieces of furniture. The show began 30 seconds after we went in, with two ghosts coming in and flapping their arms at us. The ghosts were much dressed like the Scarecrow from The Dark Knight, and the odor coming off their costumes made me gag. By then, all three of us cousins were backed up against the wall, with the other two huddling behind me and the ghost flapping their dirty sleeves in my face. I screamed at that point, not because of my fear of the paranormal, but because being a small dark shack bathed in red light, surrounded by strange men, set off my paranoia. The young men, probably in their early to mid-20s, jumped in front of us in a very dramatic gesture with their arms outstretched, and put us girls behind them. My cousins, aged 5 and 7, started crying, and held onto both of my hands and legs of their uncles. It would have not been a creepy gesture, but the men kind of started pushing us against the wall with their bodies, hands still outstretched, and patting us on the face and body. I still remember how sweaty his hand was as it moved over my skin, and how his body pressed against mine in that congested, dark, stinky space. Hysterical, I yanked at my younger cousins and screamed that I needed to leave right then. One of the young men said something about not leaving until the ride was over, but I wasn't listening. I screamed and I hit them. I was a very charming child with an exceptionally loud set of lungs, and demanded that they open the door. Once outside, I almost fell on the grass, oddly drained but thankful to be out of whatever that was. One of the young men came up and touched my hair and murmured, "Sweet baby," and walked away. I dragged both of my cousins and ran until we found our actual uncle. The group of men just watched us go with the creepiest smiles. Also, fun fact, but there is a large hole in the boundary wall of the park, and next to it was a strip of unkempt trees, which to this day is infamous for its population of druggies. We never returned to that park again and didn't speak of the entire episode. I'm 23 now, and reading other stories in this thread just triggered that one long-suppressed memory. So, dear ghosts and uncles, let's not meet again. First time posting, I had a strange unsolved experience as a kid that has been on my mind a lot lately, and decided that this is a place to share. The first half of the story takes place on Halloween, 1991. A quick bit of background. I was a 7-year-old boy at the time and my little sister was only a few months old. I lived in Long Island, New York, on the border area of the town that kind of acted as an unspoken separation between the more affluent area and the lower income, hood type area. My dad owned a bar across from the train station that was extremely popular in the 80s, and was still riding the tail end of that boom. My father did very well for himself. My father and his business were well known around the town. I think this may have had to do with what happened. He eventually squandered everything on a drug addiction, but that's a different story. And for the record, I had nothing but love and respect for him despite this. So, it was Halloween. My mom was working the night shift at my dad's bar. My sister was home with a teenage babysitter. My dad had taken me and my friend trick-or-treating. This was the first year I was able to go out at night, so I was super stoked. When we get home, there are cops at my house. The babysitter is crying and my mom came home. Earlier, while the sitter was alone with my sister, she got a phone call from an unknown woman asking to speak with me. She said that I wasn't there and asked the woman stated that she had a gift for me and would call back. The woman called back a few times saying something similar and she began to insist that she was going to come and deliver her gift. Eventually she called and said to look in the mailbox. This is when the sitter called the police. The police found a pirate skull Halloween decoration that would talk and shake when you clapped, as well as several candy bars. My whole family was really bugged out about this. I was scared, but I also kind of liked the skull thing and convinced my parents after much protest to let me keep it. My parents for a few weeks were on edge after that, and they hated the toy. They tried to work with the police, but there wasn't much they could do, and the whole thing kind of went cold. Fast forward to the following summer, 1992. My best friend and I decided to have a car wash in front of his house, which was diagonally across the street from my house. We had out buckets, soap, a hose, and a sign. You get the picture. This black car rolls up. It was an old 80s Crown Vic or something like that. One of those big cars that steer like a boat. The window rolls down and there's a woman sitting in the driver's seat. She has short white hair. Kinda had this whole Ursula vibe going. I told my parents she was old because of her hair, but looking back, she could have been as young as in her 40s. She says, my name. Do you know who I am? I said no, and she goes, I'm the one who gave you those nice presents on Halloween. My jaw drops and I freeze up just staring. And then like something out of a horror movie, she begins to laugh maniacally and then speeds off. I ran home and told my parents. That was the end of it, and they never figured out who it was. My father had speculated that this person may have believed he was wealthy, and maybe he was trying to get a ransom. Maybe she was a scorned ex-lover. I don't know, I've speculated many things, but will never likely know at this point, as I am now 35 and that was a lifetime ago. Sorry if this story had an underwhelming payoff at the end, but it has bugged me for years and I wanted to share it. In the past year, I've had several of my dad's old friends find and reach out to me on Facebook. My dad and I had the same name and face, so I was easy to find. Two of them are women. One of them made me a little uncomfortable because she kept pushing to hang out, and she's a lot older than me. Like, go to the bar hangout. I said no, of course, but she asked me a lot of personal questions. And that's what brought the story back to the forefront of my mind. I'm getting a weird feeling in my gut that this woman, or even the other ones on Facebook, is the same woman that stalked me as a child. That thought gives me a chill, but I would really like to know who this person was and why they stalked me. I hope this is the right place for the story. This happened about 12 years ago. I was 16 at the time. It was summer and I was hanging out with my friend Leanne and a guy that I liked, Billy. We were sitting around trying to figure out something fun to do when Billy said, let's go to a haunted house. Leanne and I were goth girls at the time and got really excited by this suggestion. I don't really know what we thought we would do. Maybe sit around in a dark house and talk to ghosts, but we drove an hour to a haunted house. The house sat all alone in a giant field of overgrown grass. I don't remember what time it was, but it was dark and there weren't any streetlights near the house and all the windows were boarded up. We marched through the grass and I, wanting to seem cool, marched to the front door first. Again, wanting to appear cool in front of my crush, I decided to be the one to open the door and go in first. I reached out, the door was unlocked and I pushed it open. It was pitch black inside, I couldn't see into the house at all. It was like a blanket of blackness was in front of me. I then got an eerie feeling, the kind of feeling you get when someone is watching you. I felt like someone was standing in front of me in the blackness. That's when I heard it, just a few feet in front of me. The quiet and steady sound of someone breathing. I lost it. I started screaming and I turned around and ran away. Leanne and Billy started laughing and followed me nonchalantly. I ran all the way back to the car where they both started making fun of me. What was that? Leanne asked. Breathing, I heard breathing. Someone was breathing. You probably heard one of us, said Billy. No, it was in front of me. Someone was breathing. They continued to make fun of me, telling me it was my imagination, but I was adamant. They tried to convince me to go inside with them, but I refused. I was not going in there. I was creeped out and had a very bad feeling. I was not going in that house. After about 20 minutes, they gave up and we all decided on a new plan for the night. A few days later, Leanne approached me. So, I told my mom about that house we went to the other night. She said that house is a well-known squatter house where homeless people, drug addicts, and crazies hang out. I'm so glad we didn't go inside. To this day, I know for a fact someone was standing in front of me. I don't know what would have happened had we gone inside, but I'm so happy we didn't.